Parents, what spooky past life memory do your kids have? Story 1. I was watching an old video of a jazz drummer playing a solo. No idea who it was, but he was really good. My daughter, probably age 3, was looking over my shoulder for a minute before she said, "I used to play drums like that when I was a man." If anything, this entire thread is making me convinced we can be reincarnated. There have been a ton of similar well-known documented cases that follow the same pattern, and it really only takes one of these cases to be true to really change our entire understanding of our consciousness and its survival after death. I'm terrified at the prospect of being reborn into a third world conflict zone or as an animal. This definitely should change people's perspectives on the world. I was flipping through channels once and passed an exercise channel where a pretty and voluptuous black woman was happily demonstrating some cardio moves. My then 2 to 3-year-old son walked in, saw the TV, gasped, and began pointing and shouting, "Mommy, it's me! I was her!" There were a couple more instances where he would point out a black woman either on TV or in a store, and they always had vaguely the same body shape and hairstyle, and he would point and excitedly tell me how he used to be just like her. For the record, he's a chubby-cheeked white kid. Alright, I've scrolled down far enough to be creeped out because a buddy of mine told me some stuff drunkenly the other night. He's an ex-Marine and serious as hell. He never says anything lightly. It matches up with what all these kids or OPs said when they were kids. He told me that he had been on this loop before, and not just once, many times. I almost laughed it off because I'm not a superstitious type of guy, but neither is he. These other stories line up with what he said the other night, and I'm feeling a little creeped out right now. WTF is this crap? Story 2. Answer from my parents. When I was 4, my parents and I went to my aunt's farm. The wind started picking up and I looked back at my parents and said, "Gotta tie down the hay bale down in the wind." That's how David died. To this day, no one knows who David is. That I could see being something you picked up from a TV show or a movie, or a picture book. Children's fiction has a lot more violent farm accidents in it than you might think. Story 3. My little brother said when he was 3 or 4, "When I was a grown-up, I went to war and I never came back." "When I was a grown-up, I went to war. I never came back," he muttered solemnly. The child sat down to reflect on his past trauma, but he decided to let it go and live his new life. "Can I see my birthday presents now, Mommy?" My little sister said to me when she was 3 she was a nurse when she was a grown-up and healed people who fought in a war, and her husband died in the war. She remembered her daughter, Alicia. She used to draw her daughter in daycare, so we had to take her to a psychologist. Story 4. My daughter asked me, "Remember my fancy hat?" And when I said no, she said, "Yeah, before I was dead. I used to work in a bank. I saved my money and bought a hat in a round box. I was on the bus and a man almost sat on it. Then the bus crashed and I died." She was about 3 and totally casual about it. Maybe she just had a dream about something like that? Sometimes I have dreams that I'm this Chinese guy from the late 1800s. Sometimes I'm young and sometimes I'm old. I don't know his name, but everyone in the dreams speaks Chinese and I see subtitles. Sometimes in the dreams people mention the subtitles, asking, "Are those subtitles?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't speak Chinese." But in Chinese apparently. It's weird as hell and happens quite often, and I'm an indigenous Canadian. Story 5. My middle son used to talk about having a different mom before me. He would say she was blonde and looked nice but wasn't nice. He would bring it up randomly and only ever got a bit emotional when he would tell me that when he was with her, he never got to grow up. He said that he chose me to be his mom this time because I would let him grow up and get old. When he would say that last part, it was as if he was looking for reassurance. He'd ask me, "Right, Mom? Can I grow up this time?" It really screwed me up sometimes. Wow. I don't want to divulge too much information about myself, but growing up my wife had relatives that she was close with who were killed by their mother with a knife when they were young. A group of 2 siblings. My kid, who had never been told about them, never watched violent TV, never knew about violence because he was only 2, barely talking at all, autistic and delayed, started crying when my wife was changing him. "Mommy, please don't cut his own name with a knife," which were extremely similar last words to her youngest murdered relative. Freaked her out. Me too, of course, but it struck up trauma in her. "How old was your son?" When they are at some age, they may have recurring dreams, usually based on a random real-life experience. Some random blonde lady at a mall could have told him that he was cute, asked him how old he was, and then said she wished he stayed at that age. And then he had dreams or nightmares about it. Then after a few years, they can't tell if that was a dream or reality. My old roommate once told me a story as a kid when he was making shadow puppets, and when he made a shadow of the devil, it stayed on the wall, even after he pulled his hands away. He got scared and ran and hid under the covers. When I told him it might have been a dream, he was adamant it was not. Then, weeks later, he told me, "You know, this was around the time I watched my first horror movie. One of those Exorcist movies, even though my parents told me not to. So, I don't know, it might have been a dream." Story 6. My nephew, around 2 or 3, would talk about his other mom and then look confused when you asked him to elaborate. "She's not here now." I can remember asking about my other mom too. I also remember having moments of clarity, sort of when I'd become really aware of my surroundings. I'd be around the house playing or something, get a little confused, and kind of freak out. It was like everything around me was just wrong somehow. It felt like I shouldn't be there, and I'd run for my mom. I can also remember that during one of these freakouts, I kept telling my mom that I wanted to go home, even though I was home. Besides that, I don't remember anything specific. This all happened at our old house, so I wasn't any older than 5 at the time. I was probably just being a weird kid somehow, I don't know. What do you remember about your experiences, if you don't mind me asking? I used to do the same as a toddler, talk about other mom before you, and that she wasn't very nice, not like my actual mom. My mom always swerved the conversation away because it used to freak her out a bit. I have zero recollection, always assuming it was me just doing annoying weird kid stuff, but having stumbled across the research by Dr. Ian Stevenson, I do wonder if there's anything more to it. Almost word for word, my daughter used to say, "my other family," or "my other mom," or "my other dad," or "my other family before." It really creeped me out. I never wanted to open up that Pandora's box, so I never asked her to elaborate. She even said before, when my name was Rose, she would bring up her other family often though, and it eventually just stopped. This was all before she was school age, and before the ability to imagine like that. She also didn't watch TV, so didn't have exposure to something that would plant ideas in her mind. My daughter did this when she was 2. She'd look at my wife and me and say something like, "My last mom said I couldn't have chocolate," or "My last mom always walked me to school." It was really weird hearing her talk about it. We'd say, "You've never had another mom. Mommy is your mom. She gave birth to you." And she'd get confused and say, "Well, my other mommy had me too." Super weird stuff to think of if it's a real memory. When I was a kid, instead of an imaginary friend, I had a far-away house that also had another far-away mom. I would talk about it often and sometimes use it as leverage. While my far-away mom would let me have a second dessert, my parents took me to a child psychologist who said it was pretty normal. It's a mechanism for children to express themselves creatively, just like imaginary friends. My cool mom even drove me around randomly one day when I said I wanted to go to my faraway house. I kept giving random directions. Eventually on that trip, I think I realized it didn't actually exist and I never brought it up again. Story 7. My 5-year-old daughter said to me, "I was in your belly twice, Mama. The first time I died before I came out, but I came back. I did lose my first pregnancy 8 months before getting pregnant again. She was never told. I don't know what it was, but that's what happened." I had that memory also. When I told my mom, she was shocked. I'm an only child, and I never knew she was pregnant before me. But she was, and that's when she admitted it. That's creepy AF. I've never known about this, but apparently my mom also lost a baby in her belly before giving birth to me. I've always felt like I was living with a second person inside of me. Not that I'm hearing voices or anything. Also, I'll ask my dad if he has any spooky memories of me or my brother saying weird stuff at the age of 3 or 5. I had a very early miscarriage before getting pregnant with my son and always wondered if it was just a dress rehearsal for him to try again. Never felt like I lost a baby. My sister described the same feeling about a miscarriage followed by a successful birth. All I know for sure is I certainly don't believe life fully begins at conception. It's a train they may take, but it's still at the platform for a while. That's what I think anyway. Interesting, my wife's most recent miscarriage before our daughter was a boy, but that's still a really interesting way of looking at it. We did IVF, so we knew the gender of the embryo put in. We had one female embryo from the first retrieval, and that transfer didn't take place, so we had to try male next. Then after the miscarriage, we did another retrieval and got more female embryos. So maybe in a way the girl wasn't ready the first time and the boy knew that, so he let the girl try again. Similar to this, I apparently told my mom that there were 2 people ahead of me in line to be born, 2 girls and a boy. I asked my mom where my other sister was. Turned out she had a miscarriage between my older sister and me, who was a girl. Kinda similar, but I actually still have vague memories of knowing my brother and sister before they were born. It's like a ghostly, hazy image, but I swear I remember it, and once I asked my mother about it and she told me that I did once ask her before my siblings were born when my brother and sister were coming. She obviously dismissed it as just a kid asking an innocent question, but I swear I remember knowing them. This sounds freaking crazy writing it out. Maybe I am crazy. I don't know. Story 8. My son said once, "Mommy, when I was big and you were little, I remember when we danced in the kitchen. The only person I ever danced in a kitchen with as a child was my grandfather." Hold up. So if I have no other offspring, that means my queue time will be longer? Looks like there's some priority given to that family. Not according to the old fortune teller. No crap. My weeb college friends in the early 90s went to some event as a group and approached someone doing tarot cards or some such crap. She looked up at them and said, "Oh, you've been together for a very long time." They laughed and agreed, saying they'd been friends for a few years now. The tarot card reader laughed. "No, like centuries." When they looked at her oddly, she added, "We come back in the same groups, we just play different parts. And you have been together for a long time." Nah, I think how it works is you collect karma points during a lifetime. There will be plus and minus until you get your final balance. The majority of your points you spend on choosing your spawn point, social background, etc. Then you have to specify yourself. The higher you are in a specific trait, the more points per stat. Memories and instincts are passed down. This is proven in rats, I believe. Rats that learn that a floor will shock them if they touch a particular item, their offspring will sometimes be born already knowing that touching that item will shock them. Not only that, but there has been research showing that if a rat learns how to run a maze, rats on the other side of the planet will somehow know how to run that maze more efficiently. There are also species of corals that will all reproduce and spread their sperm at the same time globally. If there is a group of coral that is being hindered in this process, the global collective will wait for them. This applies to even one of these corals that may be in a bucket somewhere totally away from the ocean. The features of NDEs, blinding light, tunnel vision, feelings of joy, floating, are all readily explained by the brain undergoing starvation of oxygen and dying. Every attempt at performing an actual experiment to test it, like leaving notes on top of shelves so that they could read if they actually floated outside their body, etc., has always shown no actual effect. I'm open to the idea of reincarnation and an afterlife, but I'm also not gullible. A big claim like that is absolutely testable, and until there's an actual demonstration that is measurable in any way, I'll withhold my belief. I have stayed at monasteries and read books on related topics and I enjoy it, I just haven't been convinced it's actually real. It's one thing as a thought experiment or hope, but to claim it as a fact is jumping the gun. Story 9. I used to watch my nephew when he was about 3 or 4. One day he was at my house and pointed to a magnet of Arizona. It had a picture of the desert with rock formations. The kid pointed at it and asked where it was. He said he used to live by red rocks like that with his first family, who all had straight, dark hair. He is blonde and curly now, and he had a mom and a dad, and he had had a brother until he went too far into the desert, too close to dark, and got eaten by, not dogs, not wolves, but smaller. I said, "Coyotes?" And he kind of mouthed the word I said, and said, "Oh, that's what you call them." Then he was sad and didn't want to talk about it anymore, so we had lunch, and that was the first and last time he mentioned it. As soon as I could talk, about 2, I would tell my parents about my moon family, and how I had lived with them until I said a bad word and got sent to Earth, and landed in a bush where my mom made a salad from the leaves, and that's how she had me. I would make my mom so mad by telling her she was doing stuff differently than my moon mom. I doubt I'm the first person to think of this, but I've noticed that these stories usually involve kids of a particular age, and I really feel like it has to do with something I learned in high school, kind of by accident. Someone brought the movie Waking Life to a party, and I ended up getting really involved in it. Waking life seems like the kind of thing Reddit would know about, but being relatively new here, I'm just going to explain it. It was a documentary about lucid dreaming done with a really kind of silly effect on a regular digital camcorder, to which they added animations and such, but it's essentially a series of different people explaining their experiences with lucid dreaming, and this movie explained how you could learn how to do it. Intrigued, I started doing some research on it the next few days and discovered one of the instrumental things you need to unlearn is immediately forgetting this stuff when you wake up. Apparently, part of proper brain development involves trying to forget your dreams as quickly as possible when you wake up so that you aren't using that information to guide your actual physical behavior. I have noticed this crossover though. Like when you're fighting someone in your dream and you wake up throwing a punch, almost as if it's so important to win this fight in your dream that it's worth actually punching anyone near you. The other thing dreams are really good at is not solidifying any detail until you start looking at it closer, hence why you hear, "I had a dream about insert person, but they looked completely different." Your brain knows who that person is, even though your memory can't get all the appearance details correct. It's kind of hard to do without actively remembering to ask questions about basic reality, but the next time you are dreaming, see if you can remember to ask yourself if you know what time it is before looking at a clock. If you are dreaming, you will actually know that answer before you actually look, and it feels really strange. I have always wondered if kids at this age have these vivid stories that come from seemingly nowhere and could be a result of a recurring dream that they are having before they're able to accurately draw the line between what is real and what is a dream. Which explains why he wouldn't know what coyotes were called, and since coyotes are native to that area and really fit the description he gave, it follows that this would be the only logical answer. But it solidified to the notion of coyote when asked, and that's possibly what he would see even now in retelling that story. It's a crazy theory, I realize, and again, I'm probably not even close to the first person to think of this, but I've always wondered about it. Story 10. When my son was 4, we drove past a cemetery. He asked me if I remembered when he died and was buried. I said no and asked him what he meant by saying that. He said he had died, was buried in a cemetery, and that's when he started growing in my belly. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up when he said this. He doesn't remember saying this. It seems obvious on second thought. I just realized one of the implications of reincarnation, that when you die, you just reappear inside another body and you still remember your previous life. Perhaps slowly the memories of your previous life start to fade, and you're desperately trying to hang on, but feel them slipping away and you're powerless to stop it. But you can't tell anybody or write anything down because your body isn't developed enough. Or perhaps you haven't even been born yet. In some way, it sounds like a nightmare. Some people look forward to dying at the end so they can be in heaven with their loved ones. I'll get to see my mom and dad or dog again, but you just get to slowly forget they ever existed, and that process would be heartbreaking. On average, a person will have 3 dreams a night. From the dreams we remember, we know we interact with other people and are able to feel things just as we do in real life. But we hardly remember these dreams, the people we met, and the things we did when we woke up. If we do remember, we quickly lose the memory of the finer details until we forget the entire dream itself. It's a little worrying to me that the same happens when we die. That this life is just like one of the thousands of dreams we have, but when I wake up with no recollection of my dreams from the previous night, I can't feel sorrow or regret for the life I led in those dreams because I have no memory that they even happened in the first place. Story 11. When my nephew was about 3 or 4, my sister said he was throwing a tantrum in the car while he was in his car seat, and he yelled at her randomly, "I waited 100 years to be born." I don't have any memories from past lives or anything, but I remember the waiting in between. It was in such a weird place. The waiting didn't feel too long, but I remember waiting a lot longer than others. I don't remember being able to communicate either. I remember basically being like a factory reset. First, I observed my mom for a bit. Like multiple years before she had me, I'd pop in to see important events. Like when she had to jump off a balcony because her boyfriend pointed a gun at her. We're not religious at all, but anyhow, she basically has 3 toddler-sized angels, and I got to hang out with them for a while and follow her around too. We got to help her land on the ground safely. Mom's recollection of the event is that she blacked out mid-air. I had a sense of self, and personality and my own voice, etc. Then I was basically in a black nothingness void for a while. It was very comfortable. didn't have a body and everything was black, so I wasn't necessarily here or 15 feet away. Distance didn't exist, and it was warm. In the beginning, I knew my name, liked how my voice had a southern accent, and was a woman in my 30s who died in the 1930s. I'd basically go out of consciousness and be woken up again. Each time I had less of a sense of self. I no longer remember what my name was or what my voice sounded like. My voice changed to what I can only describe as some sort of default, and I didn't have the knowledge of my previous life anymore. Sometimes I'd just be woken up and put back to sleep. Other times when I'd wake up, I'd see scenes from this life. Here's where it gets a bit weirder. For important events, I'd either observe third person basically floating in the air, see it through someone in the room, or actually get dragged into my body. For being born, I was floating and then got dragged in to look at my mom, but when they brought my body out of the room, I was floating once again to observe my mom. After events, I'd go back into the void and forget more of myself. Each time I was dragged into my body, I was able to do or say more things. I remember sometimes just being in my body because the pets were talking with me. They are basically adults, by the way. Full understanding of English, but the pets at the time were an 18-ish-year-old cat and an 11-year-old dog. I don't remember talking with the kitten I got to pick out as a toddler. When I was a toddler, I spent much more time in my body and less in the void. But being in my body, or not, didn't seem to be my choice. Sort of. Okay, this is all you need to see for now, go sleep. One day, when I was 2, I was playing on the balcony with my kitten and rockstar Barbie doll. She had a vibrant orange jacket with a black guitar on it with blue jeans, and I dropped her. I liked her so I reached for her as she was falling into the grass below. And I spent 100% of my time in my body since then. I'm not sure if sticking just required an attachment to something or what, and my mom and I are still super weirded out by the thought of the body just being on autopilot. Is the soul split into parts and the consciousness takes a bit longer to come around to joining back? I have absolutely no idea. Children seem like they're there. All the pictures of me look like a normal baby, interacting with my environment. I had foods that I loved and hated, etc., and attachments to other things. Perhaps it just took that long for me to fully forget. I'm not sure. It's just weird. Anyhow, if someone uses this for their religious propaganda, I'm deleting the heck out of it. Have a great day and don't be buttheads. From what I've read, the soul typically waits 100+ years to heal itself from the trauma of physical incarnation, as well as reflect on the lessons learned with its higher self and group of peers. As someone else mentioned, souls tend to incarnate in groups over and over. For example, your grandfather could be your son, your boyfriend could have been your teacher previously, and so on. This comes from the teachings of Ra, which was channeled by a group in the 80s. The teachings are called the Law of One. The point is to transcend dimensions, and earthly incarnation is vital to progressing rapidly. As adversity promotes growth until you have come full circle with the Creator, there are groups who want to stray away and create their own kingdom. And this is what people refer to as the Orion Group, Illuminati, etc. Our Earth is negatively polarized with powers that contracted to tend to be negative and self-serving as to provide the most adversity for our learning when harvest comes. You can transcend to the next dimension or repeat this cycle until you learn this lesson. I'm pulling this from memory from what I've read. It's the most interesting thing I've encountered when searching for esoteric truth and resonates deep within me. Story 12. When I was 3, I used to tell my mom stories about my other family every night before bed, the siblings I had and the dog too. One day she took me to Target and I told her I wanted big girl undies and she said she would buy them for me and I could wear them when I was potty trained. I told her that my other family already potty trained me so I could start wearing them now. I put them on that day and never had an accident after that. She never potty trained me and was just shocked. Little kids are freaking weird when it comes to potty training. My little sister absolutely refused and said that she'd only stop using diapers when she turned 3. On her 3rd birthday, she started using the toilet like a normal person. Not even her little plastic potty, the real one. So I guess she'd figured it out forever ago and was just messing with us. I wonder if that same phenomenon can explain why I knew how to swim. I was around 4 and we were at a family party at a local pool. I think it was the first time I was ever at a pool that wasn't a baby pool or a backyard type plastic one. My mom said as soon as she wasn't looking, I made a beeline for the water and jumped in. At the last minute, she saw me and chased after me, but I was already in the water, swimming. I'd had no lessons or anything prior to this moment, and she said it was like I'd already had full comprehension of how to tread water. I'd obviously had lessons after that and went on to swim competitively for most of my younger years, but that's so weird to think about in this context. Story 13. Didn't believe in ghosts and crap until this day, but it's fair to say that now I have a slightly more open mind. Our 2 to 3-year-old daughter was playing on her own, but like she was playing hide and seek with an imaginary friend. "Are you playing hide and seek?" She said yes. "Who are you playing with?" "Uncle Andrew." My wife's brother Andrew was 7 when he drowned, when my wife was 5. Didn't like to talk about it, so we never mentioned it. My cousin's kid was jumping on the bed and had her hands out like she was holding onto something. When asked what she was doing, she said, "Playing with Grandpa." Cousin asked, "Who's Grandpa?" "Yours, Mommy." When asked what he looked like, she described him to a T, and jumping on the bed was such a Grandpa thing to do. He had died when she was 5 months old, and my grandma died before she was born. A couple of days later, they were at my mom's, and my mom had a picture of her parents. She walked up, dragging her brother with her, and said, "Look, Jay, that's Grandma and Grandpa. Remember? They play with us sometimes." In a weird but creepy sort of way that's very sweet. My grandparents were not overly nice people, so I missed out on that part of my life. Hearing about grandparents playing with their grandkids, even under the circumstances you mentioned, makes me happy because even though they may be gone, your cousin's kids are still getting to have that moment. Something similar happened with my first cousin's daughter. She's about 2.5 and just started talking, really. My first cousin sadly experienced a miscarriage this past year in 2020. Interestingly enough, her mother-in-law is a self-proclaimed medium. I've always been slightly skeptical, but the woman has said some stuff that's honestly too spooky and accurate to discount. So I believe, I'd say. She told my cousin that the child was a boy and he hung around her daughter and played with her. My cousin found her daughter playing one day, honestly like a few weeks ago I think, just chattering away, and when she asked her who she was talking to, she pointed to the dead space in the corner and said, "Boy! Boy!" It could be a coincidence, but we thought it was kind of spooky, all things considered. Oh, my ex's big brother did something like this too. Can't remember the details exactly, but his mom was very big into spirits and stuff after a terrifying experience in her old house before her ex was born. His brother was only about 3 at the time, and she saw him playing a game of patty cake by himself. She asked what he was doing, and he said he was playing with Uncle Stephen. Can't remember the actual name, so going with this. Stephen was the name of her brother who died when he was a teenager, freaking her out. Other experiences she mentioned in that house were someone pushing her other brother down the stairs. Like felt the force of someone pushing him, but no one was there. Something screaming in her ear, and a little boy she thought was ex's brother running by only to find him still sleeping in his bed, the opposite direction from where the boy ran to. Not sure if any of it was true, but damn, freaky all the same. Story 14. I don't have kids, but when my brother was a toddler, he said something to my mom about throwing hay in the window for the horses. My grandfather died before his birth and was a farmer. The barn had windows, and he would just throw the hay into the windows for the horses to eat. My mom was really freaked out, but he never said anything else similar again. Story 15. I had a brother pass away from brain cancer. At the time, we had a cat who was a calico and just sort of knew he was battling something. She was really mean to most people, but with him, she was gentle. He would grab her paws and she would just let it happen. Well, about 3 years after he passed, my parents had another child, another boy. He was about 3 when he told my parents about the white, brown, and black cat that used to let him grab her paws. She had died about a year before he was born. My son told my parents all about Coco and Boo Boo. Described the cats to them. He was 4, my cats Coco and Boo Boo had died 4 or 5 years before he was even born. When my mom showed him various pictures of cats that we had, he pointed them both out and told her Coco liked to knock things off the table. Coco had a nickname, Princess Knock It Off, because she would knock over anything she could. I didn't have any pictures of these cats myself, so he'd never seen them. I didn't talk to him about them either because we had other cats now. Coco and Boo Boo were litter mates and a bonded pair. Really random coincidence, but I had a baby brother who passed away from a brain tumor too. Back then, we had a really aggressive Persian cat that scratched me a bunch of times as a kid, even though I tried to avoid him, and was generally very non-affectionate. My brother tormented her though, would wear my dad's shoes and stomp around to scare her, and she just went with it. But the cat was never aggressive towards him. The first time he had a seizure, prior to his diagnosis, in the middle of the night, she kept meowing and whimpering in our shared room to wake me up so I could call someone to check on him. We ended up giving the cat away since we moved to our native country for more affordable treatment and surgery, but yeah, it's weirdly enough a nice memory of him. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.